The CNN newsroom hummed with its typical evening energy. Anchors were preparing for yet another routine international segment. Adjusting his tie, Anderson Cooper glanced at his notes on African economic developments, anticipating nothing beyond standard diplomatic coverage. Scheduled as a brief 5-minute interview about Burkina Faso's latest infrastructure projects was the satellite feed from Ouagadougou. Technical staff performed final sound checks as producers sipped their coffee, completely unaware they were about to witness history being made. The red recording light flickered on, and Cooper offered his practiced smile, ready to begin what he assumed would be a forgettable conversation. Little did anyone know that in exactly 12 minutes, the global political landscape would be forever altered. Appearing on screen was Ibrahim Traoré, an unusual intensity in his eyes, his military fatigues crisp against the backdrop of his presidential office. Resting calmly on a manila folder that seemed to pulse with hidden significance were the young leader's hands. When Cooper began with pleasantries about economic progress, Traoré's response was measured but carried an undercurrent of steel. Anderson, before we discuss development, the world needs to understand what development truly costs Africa, he said, his voice cutting cleanly through the satellite delay. Tapping the mysterious folder once, then twice, his fingers created a rhythm that somehow felt ominous. Sensing something momentous was brewing, the camera operator in Ouagadougou instinctively zoomed closer. Slightly furrowing his eyebrows, Cooper recognized the shift from diplomatic routine to something far more dangerous. Arriving without fanfare, like lightning splitting a clear sky, the moment arrived. Lifting the folder, Traoré spoke words that would echo across continents. I have here documented proof of agreements signed between American corporations and complicit African leaders, stealing our uranium, our gold, our future. For just a fraction of a second, Cooper's professional composure wavered, but millions of viewers caught that flicker of surprise. Dense with signatures, corporate logos, and figures that made seasoned journalists' hearts race were the documents Traoré began displaying. Immediately detecting the spike in engagement, social media algorithms pushed the live stream to trending status across all platforms. From New York to London, executives in boardrooms felt their phones buzzing with urgent alerts. Crumbling in real time, broadcast to every corner of the earth, was the comfortable world of plausible deniability. Within minutes, the CNN control room erupted into controlled chaos, with producers shouting instructions and legal teams being summoned from their evening dinners. But it was far too late to contain what had been unleashed. Continuing to speak with the calm authority of a man who knew he held truth as his weapon, Traoré delivered each revelation more devastating than the last. Phone calls flooded newsrooms worldwide as other networks scrambled to verify and amplify the story. Frozen before his television screen in a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Donald Trump watched his carefully constructed narrative about African partnerships dissolve before his eyes. On decades of hidden exploitation, the young revolutionary from Burkina Faso had just declared war, and the first casualty was the illusion of honorable American leadership in Africa. Sitting in a dusty archive in Ouagadougou for 3 years, forgotten among thousands of bureaucratic files, was the folder that would change everything. While digitizing historical records, a young archivist named Fatou Cohn discovered it, her fingers trembling as she read the damning contents. The seals of 3 American mining corporations and signatures from former African leaders who had sold their nation's futures for personal wealth were borne by the documents. Page after page revealed uranium extraction agreements that paid African countries mere pennies while generating billions for Western companies, guaranteeing American intervention against any leader who dared renegotiate these colonial-era terms were military protection clauses. The most shocking revelation was a secret addendum signed by Trump's business associates, promising exclusive mining rights in exchange for political influence. Immediately, Fatou knew this evidence could reshape Africa's relationship with the world forever. Weeks of painstaking verification by international legal experts working in absolute secrecy comprised the authentication process. Swiss forensic specialists confirmed the age and authenticity of the paper and ink, while handwriting analysts verified each signature against official government records. Proving the documents had remained unaltered since their creation in the 1990s and early 2000s was the digital metadata from scanned versions. A story of systematic exploitation was told by each page, with American corporations securing 99-year leases on African mineral deposits for laughably small annual payments. A modern form of colonialism disguised as legitimate business partnerships was essentially what the legal framework created. Suspicious mining activities that had puzzled economists for decades were cross-referenced with the agreements by independent journalists in 3 countries. When the final verification report landed on Traoré's desk, his jaw tightened as he realized the scope of the betrayal against his continent. During a sleepless night in the presidential residence, as Traoré wrestled with the consequences of revelation, came the decision to expose everything publicly. Warning that powerful forces would mobilize to destroy him and his country if he proceeded, his advisors urged caution. But the young leader thought of children in villages surrounding uranium mines, their futures poisoned by radiation, while foreign shareholders counted profits. He imagined generations of Africans who would continue suffering under these hidden agreements if someone didn't find the courage to speak truth to power. The weight of leadership pressed down on his shoulders as he realized this moment would define not just his presidency, but potentially the future of African sovereignty. Echoing in his memory were his grandmother's words, "Truth is like the sun. It cannot remain hidden forever." At dawn, he made the call to CNN, knowing there would be no turning back. Like a masterclass in economic colonialism, the documents themselves read, with clauses designed to trap African nations in perpetual dependency. Regardless of changing governments, mining rights were structured to automatically renew, creating a system where democracy couldn't touch corporate interests. For American companies, environmental protection standards were waived while being strictly enforced for local competitors, ensuring market dominance through regulatory manipulation. Giving American corporations the right to request diplomatic pressure against African leaders who threatened their operations were the most sinister political interference clauses. Provisions for supporting regime change if African governments became unreasonable in their demands for fair compensation were even included in the agreements. A blueprint for maintaining Western control over Africa's resources while providing the illusion of independence and sovereignty was hidden within legal jargon. As Traoré prepared to reveal these secrets to the world, he understood he was challenging an empire built on carefully concealed exploitation. At exactly 8:47 p.m., the secure phone in Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence rang, interrupting his evening Fox News routine with an urgency that made his security detail tense. Through the encrypted line, Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' voice cracked. "Sir, we have a situation developing on CNN right now that requires your immediate attention." Switching channels, Trump's face darkened, his Diet Coke forgotten, as Ibrahim Traoré's voice filled the opulent living room. Signatures and corporate seals that Trump recognized with growing horror were contained in the documents being displayed on screen. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the phone, watching decades of carefully hidden business relationships being exposed to millions of viewers. Within minutes, his personal attorney was speed dialing from New York, while 3 different corporate executives tried reaching him simultaneously. Evaporating in real time, broadcast live to the entire world, was the comfortable cocoon of plausible deniability. A volcanic eruption of profanity that sent Secret Service agents exchanging worried glances outside his office was Trump's initial reaction. "That little African bastard doesn't know who he's messing with," he screamed at his television screen, throwing his remote against the wall. His face cycled through shades of red as he paced frantically, his mind racing to calculate the political and legal implications of the revelations. To damage control specialists, media consultants, and the most expensive crisis management firms in Washington, emergency calls were placed. Tentacles reaching into African mining operations that few people knew existed were part of Trump's business empire. Partnerships that could trigger congressional investigations and criminal charges. The young revolutionary from Burkina Faso had just pulled the thread that could unravel everything Trump had built over decades. His legendary temper, usually controlled in public, was now threatening to explode onto the world stage. Hastily converted into a war room was the Mar-a-Lago dining room as advisors rushed in with laptops, legal documents, and damage assessment reports. Sitting at the head of the table like a general surveying a lost battlefield, Trump's usually perfect hair was disheveled from anxious running of fingers. "We need to discredit this kid immediately," he barked at his communications team, his voice hoarse from shouting. That direct attacks could backfire spectacularly, potentially validating Traoré's claims in the court of public opinion, was warned by legal experts. Too detailed and specific to dismiss as fabrications were the documents being broadcast, forcing Trump's team into reactive mode rather than their preferred offensive strategy. Showing the story gaining traction faster than any previous political scandal was social media monitoring, with hashtags supporting Traoré trending worldwide. Trump's fury intensified as he realized he was losing control of the narrative for the first time in his political career. By midnight, Trump had made the fateful decision that would define the crisis. He would fight fire with fire, consequences be damned. With the familiar urge to strike back immediately and decisively, his Twitter fingers itched, despite urgent pleas from his advisors to remain silent until morning. "I've never backed down from a fight, and I'm not starting with some nobody from a country most Americans can't find on a map," he declared with characteristic bravado. The room fell silent as everyone recognized the dangerous gleam in Trump's eyes, the same expression that had preceded his most explosive public meltdowns. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from Republican leaders begging him to exercise restraint. But already crafting the inflammatory response that would soon shock the world was Trump's mind. The beginning of his complete unraveling would prove to be the decision to escalate rather than de-escalate. History would remember this midnight moment as the point when Trump's legendary combativeness finally met an opponent who couldn't be intimidated, bought, or destroyed. Before dawn in Accra, the first protests erupted as Ghanaian university students who had watched Traoré's broadcast organized spontaneous demonstrations outside the American embassy. With videos of young Africans holding printed copies of the leaked documents, their voices unified in chants of "no more exploitation," social media exploded. Across Nairobi, Lagos, and Dar es Salaam, similar scenes unfolded within hours as the revelations spread like wildfire through digital networks. Abandoning their stalls to join marches, street vendors joined, while office workers streamed out of buildings to witness history being made in real time. The rallying cry for a generation that had grown up questioning why their resource-rich continent remained impoverished became the hashtag #TraorTruth. As millions demanded answers from their own leaders, traditional media outlets across Africa scrambled to provide continuous coverage. Immediate, electric, and unstoppable was the collective awakening. Africa's youth had found their voice and their champion. In the halls of the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, emergency sessions convened as heads of state grappled with the explosive implications of Traoré's revelations. Among the first to publicly support the young revolutionary was President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, declaring that the time for hidden agreements and secret exploitation has ended. Initially hesitant, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu found himself forced to address growing domestic pressure as Lagos protesters demanded transparency about their own mining contracts.